Welcome, everyone. Good afternoon. I know it's after the break, so usually things go slower. But I'm very happy to be here today. It's my first time at WCON. I'm super excited to be presenting. Definitely having a blast, and there have been lots of other great presentations so far. So without further ado, an obligatory who am I? My name is Marina. I currently work at ZCert as an incident responder. I'm also an organizer of B-Sides Amsterdam, which is coming back after quite a few years of not existing. We are unfortunately, well, I guess fortunately for us, sold out. We do have a waiting list, including for our CTF, which is sponsored by SANS. So if anyone wants to join, you can sign up or talk to me. And I also have stickers for anyone who is feeling some FOMO. So before my current role, I've done various things at various companies, ranging from biotech, pharmaceuticals, to big tech, regular tech, also small, medium enterprises and startups, doing everything from digital forensics and incident response to GRC, very fun stuff. The talk I'm doing today is about a company I no longer work for, which means that, unfortunately, I am limited in the information I can share. So no screenshots of the actual environment. I also have to give a disclaimer that this is not a talk. I'm getting a phone call. I should have muted everything before getting up here. Yeah, this is not a talk. This is a rant. I need this more than you do. And this project I'm talking about was a thorn in my side for about 2 years. And spoiler alert, it failed at its original goal. I'll get to how that happened later. So I think, I don't know. I don't think anything else needs to be introduced. So I do want to, because NTLM is not really a thing we talk about over breakfast. Is anyone here familiar with the term? Has anyone encountered it? Okay, quite a few people. So which of you know it from an IT or sysadmin side? All right, so you know the pain I've gone through. Who here knows it from an offensive security side? All right, so you also know the pain I'm going to talk about. Does anyone here work for Microsoft? Okay, cool. It's a safe space today. Before we get into the meat of everything being on fire, I will provide some context first. So I had just started at this new company, this new job, and I was ready to make my mark. I had big dreams and big ambitions, and like the humble and sensible person I am, I picked the problem that had been unresolved for the longest, the most complicated one, because I thought I was the best person for the job. That was how I was going to make my mark. Go big or go home, I guess. So at this particular company, they had been trying to get NTLM out for quite a while without any progress, unfortunately. They wanted to get rid of the entire authentication suite. There's multiple protocols in it. And I didn't really know what NTLM was before I signed up to get rid of it. That wasn't going to stop me. It was a security issue, and I was a security person. Seemed straightforward enough. I only started researching the topic after I committed to getting rid of it in 6 months. Not a very good idea. And to surprise absolutely no one, it was not straightforward enough. When you go to research NTLM, you may encounter any one of these terms. They are not always defined or used consistently, even by Microsoft. I had to do a bit of translation, which very much not fun. And I made a sort of chart. So if anyone wants to find out what these actually mean, I can send or share this with you. I'm not going to get into it now. So after researching, I learned that the NTLM protocol suite started back when dinosaurs roamed the earth with LAN Manager. So that was the authentication suite used there by Microsoft. And the year was 1987. So LANMAN uses a challenge response mechanism. I think we're a bit off with the slides. That's okay. So a client wants to authenticate to a server. It sends a challenge. The server checks, does this match what I already have, and sends back a challenge. And then the client sends back the challenge encrypted with some other stuff. And it's not very good. That's the gist of it. But it kind of, there are many problems with it. So for one, it uses DES encryption, which is breakable. It uses the LM hash itself, is very, it's very limited. So you can only have 14 characters maximum. If you put in more, they'll just cut it off. It is case insensitive, so everything you put in just gets converted to uppercase. And I can go into all the technical details of why it kind of sucks, or I can just show you a video of it being cracked in less than a minute and a half. So if you have a spare 7 terabytes of disk space, you can also download a rainbow table, which is a pre-computed hash list, and just crack this, as you want. But you don't even need to go through all of the trouble if you just squeeze in right there, which is what we call a man-in-the-middle attack. So the vulnerability here is that the client has to authenticate to the server, but the server doesn't have to prove its identity to the client. So it could be authenticating to another client, a server, a domain controller, or anything else you put in front of it. And then you can later do a pass the hash attack, which is used the same way a password is. And then you can shuffle that around the environment later. So that is why a few years later, it got replaced by NTLM version 1, which is wildly different. Oh yeah, it's terrible. It also doesn't salt the password and doesn't allow for multi-factor authentication. So got replaced by NTLM version 1. It works pretty much the same way with some minor improvements. So it still uses DES, which is not good. It uses MD4 hash, which is slightly better, but still not great. It doesn't require mutual authentication, so you can still do man in the middle. It still doesn't salt the password, so you can easily crack it. And I don't know what took them 6 years to develop here. So then a few years later, in 1994, it got replaced by NTLM version 2. So again, not wildly different. It uses HMAC MD5, which is slightly better, but still not great. Still no salting of passwords, still no mutual authentication, still no multi-factor authentication. So fundamentally doesn't solve any of the man-in-the-middle attack or pass the hash problems or cracking. So then, just 3 years later, in the year 2000, that got replaced by Kerberos. I'm not going to talk about it. It is way too complicated. We're not going to get into that right now. But it is much better on all fronts. It uses AES encryption, which you can't brute force so easily. It requires multi-factor authentication. It doesn't require. You can use multi-factor authentication. It also, the tickets that are generated are generally time limited and machine specific, so you can't really pass them around as easily. There are also catchy named vulnerabilities like overpass the hash or Kerberosting. So it's not immune to everything. Nothing is, but it's much better on all fronts. So, Microsoft has been saying that we should get rid of NTLM and use Kerberos, which has actually been the default since Windows 2000. So it's been telling us to do this for a while, that we have to get rid of NTLM. But Microsoft tells us we have to do lots of things. Doesn't mean that we actually do them. But is there a reason for this one? There actually is. So if you feel like, I don't know why that way disappeared, but if you feel like testing this in environments you have permission, I'm not endorsing this outside of the realms of your own quarters. But this is a number of tools and vulnerabilities that you can exploit with them. And I'm not a red teamer, so I'm not going to explain how any of these work because I will probably say it wrong, and I don't want anyone to be mad at me. But this is like, great, this is theoretical. You know, you can do this in a test environment, whatever. Has it happened in the wild? That's the interesting question. It absolutely has. So these are just a few snippets that I've taken from some different articles. Every threat actor named under the universe is also aware of NTLM and its family of vulnerabilities. And this, yeah, I'm so sorry I'm off with the slides. But this last instance, I gave this, a shorter version of this talk recently, and it's from the TU Eindhoven incident that happened earlier this spring, where I think they got hit by Kira. And this was the IT security guy who was working on that incident, shared this with me, shared the technical report from Fox IT. So that is a tangible example of this happening in the Netherlands. And we talked about it, and he said that, the main reason that this all happened was because of NTLM version 1, which they had tried to get rid of. So, Kerberos is better in every way, and NTLM is just this gross barnacle that has all these vulnerabilities. In fact, there are so many vulnerabilities that at some point they stopped writing them out by hand, and they started copy and pasting the same text, just adding some different things depending on the vulnerability. So yeah, it's not great. Hopefully you understand now why this company wanted to get rid of it. And at first glance, it didn't seem that difficult. Like, we knew we had some Windows 2003 servers in the environment that definitely couldn't upgrade to Kerberos. But for the rest, it seemed fine. And thankfully, a multi-billion-dollar company like Microsoft, can help you figure out what to do, can help you figure out where NTLM is being used, what is using it, gives you tools and information on how to find it and detect it, tells you what happens if you turn it off. No, it doesn't, unfortunately. So that was a first issue. And you might also think that because the documentation for Microsoft is so short about NTLM, that means it's fairly simple to resolve as well. Fortunately, that's also not the case. Stuff is nondescript. Things are all over the place. It's even in Microsoft's own documentation. Sometimes the links that they reference just aren't there anymore. I don't know if anyone's had this problem before. So anyways, we started with the first step, which was enabling NTLM tracking logs, which aren't enabled by default. So we didn't have a historical view. We had to turn it on and wait for a month, see what came up in the systems. But thankfully, our favorite 4624 logs tell us which authentication package is being used. So I decided to, take a peek. And I see this. I wasn't thinking about LM being a problem, but there it was. It was absolutely everywhere. So I panicked, naturally, as you do, and then tried to get my bearings. So I tried to figure out, what is actually using it. And I did find that a lot of the things that were using LM were also using a version of NTLM 1 or 2. Don't ask me why they were doing that. But yeah, so we could cross-reference the lists, and we could see where LM was only being used. It was pretty obvious that that machine can't upgrade. So that was helpful in a way. Everything else could, except for the legacy IBM system that was old enough to drink in the US. There were also a couple of legacy, laboratory applications that couldn't be replaced, so they definitely weren't going to be able to go. But I figured the rest would be fine. And this is the point where the narrator says it was not going to be fine. So I look at the logs for NTLM and NTLM2, and I see for NTLM, there's consistently, I mean, there were just a whole bunch of them, but there was one that was at the top, kind of the worst offender, and this was anonymous logon. Thankfully, this is a red herring. It is documented. For whatever reason, when there are various Microsoft services that do things in the background, and anonymous logons are not actually real logons. They're not actually accessing resources. It's not a real authentication. It just gets logged that way. I don't know why. But anyways, the next step was to figure out, based on those logs, what client was authenticating using NTLM, where it was going, make a list of those applications and those servers, and then we could see, all right, easy, figure out which can turn off, which cannot, what can go to Kerberos. No, that is not the case. Nothing with Microsoft is that easy or logical, unfortunately. The problem was that you could see which client was authenticating, but not where it was going. And that why behind the connections was exactly what we needed to find out if a device or an application could support Kerberos. Not very helpful. So after this, I went down a bit of a rabbit hole, and unfortunately I never reached the bottom, which is genuinely very disappointing to say, because I wanted to make a tool. I wanted to find a method that other companies could use in their own environments that would track down the other side of those connections, instead of just having them disappear into the ether. And I didn't figure it out. It was genuinely upsetting, genuinely disappointing. And I spent a lot of time researching on this, and I would have spent more. I am someone who likes digging. My coworkers know this. Sometimes I don't know when to stop. But I like understanding problems. I like figuring out why things work, why they don't, and then figuring out how to fix them. So I would have happily spent more hours and more days on this problem. Except I didn't have those hours and those days. I had to still check tickets. I had to help legal with investigations. I had to talk to people about their terrible passwords. I had to do regular incident response stuff and security maintenance and whatever. So I had this was not my only project. This was not my only responsibility. So I just I'm sure that I missed something. It's very possible that I made a mistake somewhere. If anyone here can point out exactly what else I could have tried, there's ghosts in the machine. If anyone can tell me what, then that would be super helpful, because I genuinely wanted to solve this problem. But I couldn't use the logon ID because a new logon ID would be generated after a successful authentication, so I couldn't track it that way. I couldn't use the process ID, because the NTLM SSP process was always the one facilitating the connection, so it wasn't application or service specific. I tried to look in the application logs, only to find they were not populated, and we didn't collect logs from our endpoints, so any kind of digging had to be done using our security tooling or manually going into the machine. So that was not it was not a very scalable approach, and there were a few things that I could kind of figure out, what to do with where they were going, but I needed something that could verify this at scale, and I didn't figure that out, unfortunately. But do you know why I had to go down a rabbit hole in the first place? Because Microsoft doesn't even tell you what Microsoft things use NTLM. Have a theory that it's because they don't know, but don't tell anyone that. So at this point, you might be asking yourself, if we went to Microsoft support, and we did multiple times over many months, and we got absolutely nowhere. Because at this point, even though I'm very much not a sysadmin, I knew more about NTLM than any of the support specialists we got. And they would give us the same advice that was copy-pasted from the same articles we had already read and tried, didn't solve the problem, and then they would always close the ticket, saying, yeah, we did everything we could. So even Microsoft's own people couldn't help us do the thing Microsoft told us we have to do. They would also do this thing that absolutely drove me crazy. So I have the memory of an overly caffeinated squirrel, and I need to have everything in writing. So when you log a Microsoft ticket, you can choose, would you like to be called, or would you like to be emailed about this ticket? I always chose email, no exception. So then, of course, they would call me, they would let the phone ring once, they would hang up, and then close the ticket saying I was unavailable. I clearly still have a lot of feelings about that. I should talk to someone about that. But anyways, that wasn't great, that wasn't working. So I couldn't figure it out, and I gave up. I'm very, very off with the slides. This is the giving up slide. This was how I felt. I went to management. I told them that this wasn't working. I told them what I had tried. We gave them the lay of the land, that we sort of had. So like what couldn't move on to Kerberos or anything higher. And we gave them a guess of what could. I told them I can't promise I can't verify anything, which is not great in an enterprise environment. But I still gave them a very conservative plan for how we could gradually increase the security, hopefully minimizing breaking things. And to my surprise, they said yes. So I was really excited when we started. So we started with a small group of pilot IT workstations, and we started disabling. So we just turned off all NTLM versions, LM 1 and 2, and that's when things started breaking. Because even though Microsoft tells you that everything can use Kerberos, that is not true. What a shocker. If you have any of these in your environment, turning off NTLM will cause them to fail. Do you know a business that can survive without all of these things? Yeah, Linux, those. How many businesses do you know that do that? So yeah, none of them. Many of these, not all, but many of these can be reconfigured to use Kerberos by default. Is that a straightforward process? No. Does it always work? Also no. And is it always clear why it doesn't work? No. Did someone say yes? Have you worked with Microsoft? Yes, true. Thank you. So the problem with Kerberos, besides all its wonderful qualities, is that it needs a direct line of sight to a ticket granting server that gives it its little ticket pass. If it doesn't have that for any reason, say you're using a VPN or a proxy server, or you happen to have DNS issues, I don't know if anyone has those, but if that is the case, then it will always fall back to NTLM. It cannot work if there is something in the way. So that's not very great. We had various modern applications that, again, should use Kerberos. It's been the default since 2000. They just keeled over and died, possibly for this reason that the line of sight was disrupted or there was something else. But I don't know. There wasn't enough time or support to do a proper root cause analysis. Because in this case, when the easiest solution is to just switch it back on again, no one's going to want you digging around there. So, moving on, we started with, we had to compromise. We started with just disabling LM for workstations. And to do that, so for the group policy update to take effect, all you need is you don't need to do a reset, but for the actual protocol blocking to take effect, you do need a reset. So that's why we started with workstations. They were doing that all the time anyway. And we were also checking in our SIEM for those lovely 4624 authentication logs to see if it was actually working. And it was. Finally, we were making progress. So we were getting rid of LM. And the way that you do this for any protocol version is you have to change the LM compatibility level in the registry using a group policy. So we were here, and we needed to be here. You can't jump. You have to go step by step. So that's what we were doing. We were going region by region, going very slowly, communicating beforehand to all the regional IT departments and some of the end users as well. So it was going. But this is also where I learned the Dutch expression peep test, which is where you turn something off, you don't tell anyone about it, and then you just wait for somebody to complain. And you should know the American version of that is scream test, which I think says something about our cultural differences. But this was starting to go. I don't really remember any incidents relating to workstations except for people having printer issues, which they always have printer issues, so we were fine. So then we moved on to servers with this wonderful experience in tow. And we had more incidents. So it was lucky timing because those crusty Windows 2003 servers were finally getting evicted. So that was removing quite a workload. That was great. But the peep test revealed some things that either, most of which could be forcefully upgraded to use Kerberos, or that just weren't capable of it. So at the end, we had a manageable list of about 10 exceptions or so. So this part also lasted much longer because you can't just restart a server willy-nilly. We had to coordinate with the IT service provider who would do it during change in Windows, update Windows update Windows. Anyway, so that took several months because they could do it in a controlled environment. They could roll back if anything went wrong. So that was what we had to do. And eventually that was also working. So we did that with NTLM 1. We did that with NTLM 2. Before that, we did that with just LM. And it was working. It almost didn't feel real. Could we actually trust what was happening? It wasn't showing up in any logs. Nobody was using it. It was very exciting. Finally, this was progress on a project where I was new that no one else had managed to solve. And here I was. I've solved it. Now, the last step, so we were all done, but the last step was to change that same LM compatibility level on domain controllers, going from 0 to 5, which wouldn't have been a problem, because nobody was using it anyway. So we were just the last step was to make sure that it was blocked on domain controllers to make it official. You could smell the light at the end of the tunnel. And then I went on holiday, which in hindsight was pretty dumb. But I tried to compensate. I did all the communication. I laid out all the rollback procedures, at least the rollback procedures I could think of. So I handed everything off to my IT colleague who was helping me. And I left my phone in Amsterdam and I flew to Canada. This was when the whole company shut down. That's a marmot, in case anyone's interested. Super chill. So was I at this exact moment. And I found out about this after I got home. But apparently something happened between the Wednesday the change was supposed to take place and the start of the following week that locked out every single employee out of the network on Monday morning. To this day, no one knows exactly what went wrong, but a mistake was made. So instead of gradually moving the LM compatibility level on domain controllers, what happened was the LM compatibility level for clients went from 5 to 0, and the level on domain controllers shot up from 0 to 5. Can anyone see a problem with this?
Yes.
Voila! That was a problem. So suddenly, clients were using exclusively the authentication protocol that domain controllers explicitly forbade, which meant that logging on to any endpoint, whether it be client workstation, server, or domain controller, was no longer possible. Except they didn't know that that was the case because the change wasn't communicated when it was made, so they thought it was a cyber attack. And it was after hours, until 4 in the morning, they were busy with this. At the end, it was my security colleague who saved the day. So we couldn't directly log into anything, but we still had EDR. So he went and was looking at the logs and saw that in 4625 failed login logs, they were getting some weird NTLM messages. And he thought, maybe this has something to do with my colleague's project. And he was correct. So finally, after much chaos and triaging, he logged into the domain controllers and manually changed the LM compatibility level from 5 down to 3. Which means that they were accepting LM, NTLM, and NTLM 2. So the incident, less than 24 hours later, was resolved. However, the initial problem was not resolved because suddenly everything was back to accepting LM, NTLM 1, and NTLM 2. So that was not great. And even though I pinky promised that this would never happen again, even though we identified the problem with the mismatch, they still didn't want to move forward with the last step because I had messed up the planning so badly. I did learn some things from this experience, though. One hopes. For starters, I obviously should not have gone on holiday. At the same time, a major change was happening. I was young and naive. Please learn from me. Much better communication also would have helped. Either we could have prevented the issue entirely, or it would have been resolved much faster, because people would have thought of it. I did not tell enough people that this was happening. And lastly, this was an unexpected discovery, but I realized that we should also be kinder to each other. Because my IT colleague, who was hands-on keyboard responsible for the change, he got ruthlessly mobbed and bullied for this. Both supervisors and colleagues were so harsh. And I understand, again, we had access to cloud services. You just couldn't log into anything on-premise. And it's incredibly inconvenient to not be able to do all of that stuff. I shut down the company for a day. That has a business impact. I'm not going to argue with that. But nobody died. Nothing exploded. Nobody got injured or hurt. People were inconvenienced for a day, but I don't think that is worth being such an asshole about. The company didn't, fall into financial ruin. Our stocks didn't drop. Nothing really happened. So I think, some compassion could have gone a long way. And just in general, blame culture isn't great. When you have an environment where there are humans involved, you will always have human error. We heard that in earlier talks today. I really appreciated the one that talked about colleagues, not end users, and that people are not the weakest link. I definitely subscribe to that as well. And if the fact that there was such a huge technical consequence to this mistake is not, I don't believe at least, that that's a failure of the individual. I believe that's a failure of the organization, of the technical processes and procedures, the things that we had in place. So if there aren't effective technical and procedural methods in place to prevent this kind of thing from happening, you're open to so much more risk than you can imagine. And while we're punishing mistakes and while we're assigning blame to people when things go wrong, adversaries are, I don't know, traversing through your infrastructure using a pass the hash attack. We are not going to be on a level playing field if adversaries and cybercrime groups work better between each other than we do on our own companies. Like we're losing from the start if we can't get past that. Or when we need to battle suppliers for the issue that they created, you might be also wondering, at least I was wondering, where is Microsoft in all of this? They created this problematic dependency. They put this protocol on absolutely everything. They don't even tell you what uses it. And then they tell you to get rid of it, and you have to get rid of it now. On top of that, they couldn't help us. Microsoft support was useless. Microsoft documentation left things to be desired. So how are you supposed to follow on that instruction? They couldn't help us do the very thing they were asking us to do. And I'm not a business person. I don't know what happens behind the scenes, but it sure looks like they created a huge problem and are now putting all the responsibility on end users to solve it. They provide no tools. They provide no methods for how to do this. Like there's a very vague instruction sheet. Thankfully, there are many sysadmins, good Samaritans, who are not associated with Microsoft, all of them, who have shared lots of information about this. And I'll also share a QR code you can use to scan for all of those resources if you want to try this at home. But I'm not the only one who is frustrated. This is from the official kind of Reddit announcement of Microsoft that they were getting rid of NTLM, which I think is an interesting Reddit. I mean, the sysadmin Reddit is huge, granted, but still interesting choice. But someone was frustrated with the lack of tooling and clear ways to investigate your environment. Other people are also overwhelmed. Like, I was not the only person who had a long list of other tasks that needed to be done. And other people also had difficulty finding the right information. And then there is this guy who is clearly not at his first rodeo. So anyways, Microsoft has been maintaining NTLM for backwards compatibility, because if they turn it off, then the entire world breaks. But if you keep producing, supporting, developing insecure products, you're not actually incentivizing anyone to stop using them. So it's kind of this chicken and egg problem, because as a company, few companies make security improvements because they want to. Most of them do it because they have to. And up until that point, they haven't really had to deal with NTLM. But you can't suddenly pull the plug on a critical Windows thing without providing the adequate communication and infrastructure for dealing with the consequences. So NTLM NTLM 1 has already been removed from Windows 11. And in the future, NTLM 2 will also be removed from Windows servers. So that is a very real deadline that is coming up. They're not messing around this time. And I think in the grand scheme of things, this is absolutely a positive, necessary step towards security, as uncomfortable and as frustrating as it can be. But on a personal note, it's kind of like we're shooting ourselves in the foot when we keep IT or IT security staff underfunded, understaffed, or when we're progressively outsourcing more and more things that really should probably be done by qualified people in-house. And I hope that this, I'm sure, at least in our company, this change did push to use better security and stop using NTLM at all. Although at that company, it's, again, I failed. So if you want to try this at home, this QR code has a bunch of sources on how to well, first of all, on how to understand NTLM, also how to identify it, how to turn it off, also how to exploit it in case you need an example that you can show to any higher management, how easily this can be abused. And if anybody wants to commiserate, here's also my LinkedIn, and you can find me afterwards on the conference floor. I'll also be here tomorrow. And with that, I would love to thank you for your attention and answer questions if there are any.
Yay! Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's see. There is questions. Thank you so much. Give a round of applause again. Thank you so much for your story.